Good morning, everybody. The committee meets this morning to consider the nominations of General Martin Dempsey and Admiral James Winnefeld, both of whom have been nominated to continue in their current positions. General Dempsey is Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Admiral Winnefeld as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We thank you both for your service and for your willingness to continue to serve in these positions of huge responsibility. I'd also like to welcome and to thank your family members, some of whom are with us here this morning. Our military families, as you well know, are a vital part of the overall success and well-being of our armed forces, and we appreciate greatly their unwavering support and their many sacrifices, usually during the course of long military careers. During your opening remarks, please feel free to reintroduce your family members to our committee. The foremost duty of the leadership positions to which General Dempsey and Admiral Winnefeld have been renominated is to ensure that our servicemen and women have what they need to win wars, to succeed in their missions, and to secure peace. Our nominees have carried out their duties with energy and with commitment. It is a testament to the quality of their service that the President has nominated them to continue in their positions. I've had frequent occasions to seek the views of General Dempsey and Admiral Winnefeld over the years in both public and private settings. Even on those few occasions when I've disagreed with their assessments or recommendations, I have found their positions to be thoughtful and well-reasoned. If confirmed, our nominees will face a series of continuing challenges. In Syria, Assad is using airstrikes, missiles, helicopters, tanks, and artillery to attack the Syrian people. He is targeting civilians in residential neighborhoods, in marketplaces, in schools, in places of worship. He's used chemical weapons against insurgents. He's increasingly relying on foreign fighters from Iran and Hezbollah to sustain his grip on power. To date, his actions have killed more than 100,000 Syrians, led more than 1 million to flee the country, forced more than 4 million more to become internally displaced, leveled entire villages and neighborhoods, and motivated the Syrian people to rise up against him. I look forward to hearing the nominees' views on the steps that might be taken to increase the military pressure on Assad in support of the administration's goal of convincing the Assad regime and its supporters, including Russia, that the current military momentum towards the regime cannot last in the face of a major insurgency that has the support of both the Syrian people and an international coalition, and that a political settlement that transitions Syria to a post-Assad regime that is inclusive of and protective of all elements of the Syrian society is the only solution. In Afghanistan, while the campaign is on track to transition responsibility for the country's security from coalition forces to the Afghan security forces, and U.S. and coalition forces continue to draw down over the next year and a half, significant challenges remain to secure the hard-fought gains. Among those challenges is putting the U.S.-Afghanistan strategic partnership on a sound footing for the long term, including through the conclusion of a bilateral status of forces agreement to ensure that our troops have the legal protections necessary for any post-2014 U.S. military presence in Afghanistan. Recent statements by President Karzai have complicated negotiation of such an agreement, and I'll be interested in what our witnesses have to say about the prospects for a successful negotiation, as well as what the status is of the efforts in Afghanistan militarily. In mid-March of this year, Secretary Hagel responded to North Korea's provocative behavior by announcing a series of steps to improve our homeland missile defense capability, including the planned deployment of 14 additional ground-based interceptors in Alaska by 2014. On July 5th, our ground-based mid-course defense system had a flight test failure. This test failure, along with an earlier failure, reinforces the need to pursue a fly-before-you-buy approach, which demonstrates through realistic flight tests that the system will work as intended before deploying any additional interceptors, and I would welcome our witnesses' comments on that issue as well. The defense authorization bill that we will bring to the Senate floor includes provisions that give the Secretary of Defense greater flexibility to transfer detainees from Guantanamo. And I'll be interested in our witnesses' views on these proposed changes in our defense authorization bill. And lastly, but far from leastly, we must confront the growing challenge of sequestration. All of the things our military needs to do, responding to regional crises, maintaining readiness, training and equipping our forces, taking care of our service members and their families, depend upon appropriate levels of funding. The damaging effect that sequestration is already having and will continue to have unless addressed and remedied and reversed, that damaging effect on the readiness of our military must be addressed, and addressed in a way that protects the vitality of our forces. So it is against the backdrop of these and many more challenges, both foreign and domestic, that we consider these two very important nominations. Again, we welcome both of you today. We look forward to your testimony, and I now call on Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned to you, we have another hearing simultaneously with this, 2 floors up, so I'll be going back and forth. Over the last 4 years, our military has suffered a steep and damaging drop in capabilities and readiness. This administration has cut nearly $600 billion already from the defense budget, reduced end strength by more than 100,000 personnel, reduced the size of the naval fleet, and cut hundreds of Air Force combat aircraft. Training and reset accounts have been gutted, and modernization programs are being starved of resources. On the horizon is the addition of $500 billion in cuts if we're unable to find a solution for the sequestration, which, you know, is kind of ridiculous. When you tell normal people that we have 18% of our budget is the military budget, and yet we're taking 50% of the cuts, it's totally unreasonable. It lets you know the priorities of this administration. The longer we allow our force to deteriorate, the harder and more expensive it will be to repair and rebuild. Earlier this year, Chairman Levin and I sent a letter to Secretary Hagel requesting a detailed plan on how the department would allocate the additional $52 billion in sequester cuts slated for fiscal year 14. The response we received was woefully light on details, but made clear that further cuts in fiscal 14 will significantly amplify the pain our military is already enduring. Admiral Winnefeld, you were asked earlier this year about the impact of the budget cuts on the military, and you responded, and I have to say it was a very courageous response. And I'm quoting now, "There could be, for the first time in my career, instances where we may be asked to respond to a crisis, and we will have to say we cannot," unquote. Well, Admiral, I feel that we're well on our way to this unthinkable reality. Recently, the Department has undertaken actions internally to address some critical readiness issues, including the resumption of flight operations for the Air Force after many squadrons, I believe 16, had been grounded for over 3 months. And while this development is welcome news, I remain concerned over the vital training and maintenance activities across the services. They remain curtailed, and nearly 700,000 DoD civilians are still being furloughed. What I find most concerning, however, is that much of this pain has been unnecessary and could have been avoided all along. Earlier this year, I introduced a bill that would have provided for the Department with flexibility to allocate the sequester cuts in a way that minimizes risk. I think at that time all the chiefs agreed that would be a better, it'd be still devastating, but not as devastating. And when we come back and we put our squadrons in flying status, again, I'm going to conduct my own test on this, and we've already looked into it, on how much more it costs now to retrain, get people back up in proficiency than it would have if we just stayed with it. Our actions at home do not occur in a vacuum. Around the world, we're seeing the effects of declining military capability and the absence of American leadership. From the Middle East to the Asian Pacific, our adversaries are emboldened, and there are growing doubts about the United States among our allies. I raise these issues today because I'm deeply concerned by the current state of our military. As our military is experiencing an unprecedented deterioration of readiness and capabilities, I ask our witnesses what advice they're giving the President on these matters. General Dempsey, at what point will you advise the President that the defense cuts will result in the dire scenario you laid out before our committee in February? And I would quote, you said, if ever the force is so degraded and so unready, and then we're asked to use it, it would be immoral, unquote. General Dempsey, you also warned in testimony to this committee that further defense cuts will, quote, severely limit our ability to implement our defense strategy. It will put the nation at greater risk of coercion. It will break faith with the men and women in uniform, unquote. The service chiefs are already talking about combat forces and capabilities that are starting to hollow out. We've had a discussion about this. You know, are we hollowing out or are we already a hollow force? I'm afraid to remind you of the comments from the Director of the National Intelligence, James Clapper, who stated earlier this year, quote, in almost 50 years in intelligence, I don't remember that we've had a more diverse array of threats and crisis situations around the world to deal with than we have today. So that's our problem, Mr. Chairman, and that's why we're having this hearing today.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. So let me call upon you, Chairman Dempsey. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished senators. I am honored to appear before you today on this 18th day of July as the 18th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm also thankful for the confidence placed in me 2 years ago, for the continued confidence of our Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense, and for the privilege of serving alongside Admiral Sandy Winnefeld and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Of course, I'm also very thankful for the unwavering love and support and tireless service in her own way of my wife, Deanie, who's seated behind me, not to mention our 3 children and our 7 grandchildren. And yes, that's +4 since my confirmation hearing 2 years ago, with 1 more due any day now to make it a total of 8.
I'm sure if it were allowed, you'd, and for that reason alone, love to be appointed a 3rd time.
Well, I don't know. Actually, quite the opposite. I'd like to spend some time with them when the opportunity arises. But I also want to mention, I noticed that my nephew Michael, who's Michael Dempsey, a student at Wake Forest University and home for the summer, has joined us today. We're awful proud of him as well. But more than anything else, I'm thankful for the opportunity to defend our nation alongside the men and women who wear its cloth. When I witness their courage and their skill, I'm very much reminded of the inscription that's on the private soldier monument called Old Simon at Antietam Battlefield that goes like this: not for themselves, but for their country. It's on their behalf and in that spirit that I'm here today. My purpose, my only purpose, is to be worthy of their service every day and in every decision, to strengthen the relationship of trust that the American Armed Forces has with the American people, to meet our sacred obligation to keep our nation immune from coercion. We can't take this relationship for granted. Historic transitions are testing our ability to meet our obligations. We're in the midst of a difficult fiscal correction to restore the economic foundation of power. And we're also transitioning from war to an even more uncertain and dangerous security landscape. So even as the dollars are in decline, risk is on the rise. If we don't manage these transitions well, our military power will become less credible, we'll foreclose options, and we'll leave gaps in our security. It doesn't have to be that way. We can and we must lead through these transitions. We have it within us to stay strong as a global leader and as a reliable ally. We can make our military more affordable without making our nation less secure. To do this, we need to get at least 4 things right. First, we need to get our strategy right. This means aligning our aims with our abilities. Strategy is nothing if it's not about setting priorities. Even as we rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region, we still have to defend the homeland from cyber, terrorist, and missile attack, achieve our objectives in Afghanistan, deter provocation on the Korean Peninsula, assure and assist allies across the globe, set a more responsive posture for a new normal of combustible violence. As we respond to new contingencies, we must come to terms with the risks and costs to these existing obligations. We may have to do less, but we should never do it less well. Second, we need to get our force right. This means keeping our military ready and balanced. So far, we're getting it wrong. We have already lost readiness that will take more time and additional costs to restore. We are already out of balance due to the magnitude and the mechanism of, not to mention the steep descent of budget cuts. But it's not too late to recover. Remove the budget uncertainty, slow down the drawdown, help us make seemingly intractable institutional reforms. If we do this, we can build a joint force to meet the nation's need for a price that the nation is able and willing to pay. Third, we need to get our people right. This means strengthening our profession while keeping faith with the military family. Ours is an uncommon profession, one that must value character as much as competence, that rests on a foundation of learning and leadership, that advances equal and ethical treatment for all its members, and that allows no quarter for sexual violence in all of its destructive forms. We also keep faith by making sure that our sons and daughters always go to war with the best training, the best leadership, and the best equipment. If we get this wrong, we won't get anything else right. Finally, we need to get our relationships right. This means staying connected to our allies and, most importantly, to our fellow Americans. Now is the defining moment in our nation's relationship with its 9/11 veterans. This generation is a national asset. They're ready to contribute in their communities. They need opportunities, handshakes, not handouts. In the end, all relationships rest on trust. 2 years ago, I offered this image at my confirmation hearing to illustrate the vein of trust that must run from our men and women in uniform on the front lines back here and right back to our communities, our families, and the American people. Today, it's still all about trust. Reconfirmation is at its base and reaffirmation of trust. I'm humbled by the opportunity, and I will continue to work to earn it every day. I know you expect it, and I know our men and women in uniform deserve it. I'd like to say one other thing before passing back to you, Chairman. As you know, I am very careful not to presume confirmation. And in that spirit, and not knowing when my last opportunity will be to appear before this body, I'd like to thank you for your leadership of this committee and your support of America's men and women in uniform, as well as the two ranking members, Senator Inhofe, Senator McCain, with whom I've had the privilege of working for the last 2 years. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Admiral.
Good morning, Chairman Levin and Ranking Member Inhofe and other distinguished members of the Committee on Armed Services. I'm also honored to appear before the committee this morning and to do so along my friend and colleague and boss, General Marty Dempsey. As you know, the military is a family business, and I'm pleased to have with me today my wonderful wife, Mary, who has been such a supportive partner. She's behind me in the joint purple outfit. She's also been a tireless advocate for military families and wounded warriors and their caregivers, which has been a great comfort to know that I have such a willing partner to do this sort of work. My sons James and Jonathan would have been with us also today, but they're both at athletic tournaments, one at a state baseball championship tournament and the other at a golf tournament. But they remind me every day of the importance of honorable service. It's been my privilege to serve the nation as Vice Chairman for the past 2 years, and I'm honored to have been asked by the President to serve another term. If reconfirmed, I'll continue to provide independent and objective advice to the Chairman, the Secretary of Defense, and the President on the shape, readiness, health, and use of the military instrument of power, and to keep this committee informed, and to give my best effort within the three portfolios of policy, investment, and people. In a world growing more rather than less dangerous, at the same time we face considerable financial pressure, there are plenty of challenges in the three portfolios I just listed. In the area of policy, as you know, we've been grappling with a host of threats to our national security interests around the world. In Afghanistan, in Iran, on the Korean Peninsula, with the continuing evolution of al-Qaeda and its affiliates, in the aftermath of the Arab awakening in Libya, Syria, Egypt, and other nations, and within the increasingly complex cyber domain. In the investment portfolio, I was first confirmed by the Senate for this job on the same day the Budget Control Act was enacted, and we continue to cope with the financial challenges in the wake of that act that are quietly eroding our readiness to defend our nation and have so impacted our ability to plan for tomorrow. To the people portfolio, we're doing our best to manage the enormous uncertainty to which our military and civilian members and their families are being exposed during this budget crisis. We're also expending considerable effort to ensure we're properly caring for our wounded, ill, and injured members and their families, as well as finding every lever we can to eliminate the pernicious insider threat of sexual assault. These are only a few of the challenges we face, and much remains to be done in all three of these portfolios. If confirmed, I look forward to continuing to serve our great nation in uniform and pledge to work with this committee on the difficult choices required to achieve a capable and strategically shaped force that can keep America safe and our interests secure. Allow me to close by saying how deeply grateful I am for the energy all the members of this committee and your able staff bring to these issues, and for your long-standing support for our men and women in uniform and our civilians. I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Let me now ask you the standard questions. I ask you both the standard questions which we ask of our military nominees. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes, sir.
I have.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree, when asked, to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
Yes,
I
sir.
do.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
No, sir.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record and hearings?
Yes,
I
sir.
will.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes, sir.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes,
I
sir.
will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communication, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have a 7-minute first round of questions. General, do you support finding additional ways to increase the military pressure on Assad?
Senator, first let me say that I'm well aware of the human suffering and the tragedy unfolding in Syria and the effect that it's having not just inside Syria but on the region. To your question about courses of action going forward, I support very strongly a whole-of-government approach that applies all the instruments of national power. As for the military instrument of power, we have prepared options and articulated risks and opportunity costs to put additional pressure on the Assad regime.
Does the administration support additional training and equipping of the opposition?
The administration has a governmental approach to the increased capability of the opposition.
Does that include training and equipping militarily?
Not through the Department of Defense.
Through other means, whether it might be other countries?
Yes.
On Afghanistan, are the security forces of Afghanistan on track to be fully in charge of securing Afghanistan by December of 2014 when the NATO combat mission ends?
They are. General Dunford assesses that he will achieve his campaign objectives in developing the Afghan security forces. Now, he does also acknowledge there are some potential gaps that he will have better clarity on after this fighting season.
But he's basically on track.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm not going to ask you what advice you've given to the President on the residual force, which might remain, assuming there's an agreement with the Afghans, after December of 2014. I'm not going to ask you what the advice is, because that's advice you give confidentially to the President, and he has a right to your confidential advice. My question, however, is the following. Have you given the President your advice relative to the size of the residual force?
I have, sir. We've provided several options. As a Joint Chiefs, we have made a recommendation on the size, and we've also expressed our view on when that announcement would best meet the campaign objectives.
Now, would you agree that legal protections for our troops, which would be provided for if we can reach a bilateral security agreement with Afghanistan, are essential to any long-term U.S. troop presence in Afghanistan?
I do believe that.
So that any presence after December of 2014 is dependent upon working out a bilateral agreement with the Afghans.
That's right, sir.
I hope President Karzai is listening to that answer.
I'll travel over there on Friday night, sir, and have a planned office call with him.
I hope that you would make that clear, and also I believe that our committee, and I won't speak for others directly, if anyone doesn't feel this way, they'll speak for themselves, but I think it's essential that he understand that there has to be a bilateral agreement that protects our troops for there to be a residual presence. And I happen to favor a residual presence, by the way.
As do we.
And I happen to favor giving confidence to the Afghans that there's going to be a continuing relation. But I do not want to just be silent in the face of what I consider to be President Karzai's unwise number of his comments, which are very unwise in terms of whether or not he wants a residual presence or not. He sometimes acts like he doesn't want a residual presence, even though it's very clear to me that the Afghan people do, and so does he, but he wants it on his terms, and it can't just be on his terms. It's got to be on a mutually agreed basis. Would you agree with that?
I do, sir. I also, though, would point out that our relationship and our interest in Afghanistan run deeper than just President Karzai.
Of course. And there's going to be an election next year, and I think you can also pass along to President Karzai that his assurances that he's not going to be a candidate in that election, but that there will be an election, are something that the committee members, I think probably most of whom have met with him, take seriously, and that those statements of his matter to us. Now, on the Guantanamo issue, do you favor? Let me start over. We have in our Defense Authorization Bill language which would give greater flexibility to the Department of Defense to transfer Guantanamo detainees to the United States for detention and trial if it's determined to be in the U.S. national interest and if public safety concerns are requested, to streamline the authority of the Secretary of Defense to transfer Guantanamo detainees to foreign countries. Do you support those provisions?
Senator, what I support is, as the senior military leader of the Armed Forces of the United States, is that we must have an option to detain prisoners. We can't expect young men and women on the battlefield to have a single option, which would be simply to kill. We must have a capture and detain option. So I support anything that will assure me that those young men and women will have that option.
And assuming that they have that assurance that there are a place or places.
That's correct, sir.
Then, given that condition, qualification, one which I share, by the way, do you then support the language of the bill?
I'd have to see the bill, but if you're asking me, has Guantanamo, the facility, tarnished the image of the United States globally? I think it has, and therefore I would welcome any other solution.
On missile defense, we have we've had an assessment from Lieutenant General Formica, a letter providing the assessment that investing in additional sensor and discrimination capability for our homeland missile defense would be a more cost-effective and less expensive near-term homeland missile defense option than deploying an East Coast missile defense site, particularly since there is no current military requirement to deploy an East Coast site. Do you agree with those assessments of Vice Admiral Syring and General Formica? And do you agree that additional analysis is needed to determine whether it would be necessary to deploy an additional missile defense site in the United States in the future?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the Vice Chairman who works that portion, but I will say, I absolutely agree. We should do the analysis before we make a decision on how best to meet that capability requirement.
Well, I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to ask Admiral Winnefeld.
I've been looking for an opportunity.
Yeah,
Senator.
well, so have I. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Admiral?
Chairman Levin, the way I've put it is that I would spend my next dollar on missile defense on the sensor discrimination that you described. There is an oft-quoted saying in the United States military, quantity has a quality all its own. In this case, quality has a quantity all its own, and that if you can get better discrimination, you can have a better firing doctrine that would help you there. I also think it's wise that we're doing the EISs, the environmental impact statements for a potential East Coast site, and as we watch the threat develop, and we're going to have to be very cognizant of that because it could develop quickly, it may become necessary to actually put into place a second site. We'll play that as we have to.
When you say we should do the EIS, or the environmental impact statement, you mean before making a commitment to a site? We should complete those assessments.
Yes, sir. I think that we're planning on doing those EISs in the relatively near term, and I think they will be done naturally, probably before there's a need to actually make a decision to go with an East Coast site. But I also want to state we need to be cautious and very cognizant of where the trajectory is of the threat.
When you say they will be done naturally, you think they should be done?
They will be done, I believe. They should be done. I agree with doing them as a hedge. It's part of our hedge strategy that we've always considered having an East Coast site. Just as part of the hedge strategy with putting more interceptors.
I'm just trying to get a clear answer. Do you believe they should be done before the decision is made as to whether any site is selected?
Yes, sir. I think so.
Now, there was an article in today's Washington Post that reported South Korea wants to again delay the transfer of wartime operational control. I'm sorry. I was looking for my card. I forget that we're using the timers. And I am glad that Peter Levine reminded me to look in front of me instead of down for a blue card. I keep looking for that blue card. I've gone over my time. I apologize to my colleagues and call upon Senator Inhofe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my opening statement, I quoted each one of you, and I think there's such very strong quotes, particularly the one that, if ever the force is so degraded and unready, then we'll be asked to use it. It would be immoral. And then the statement, General Dempsey, well, actually, I don't see it right now, but the one, yes, Admiral, that you had there could be, for the first time in my career, instances we are asked to respond to a crisis, and we will have to say we cannot. And then, of course, we saw that James Clapper said that there's never been a time in our history, and he's been around for 40 years, when the threats are so great and diverse as they are today. Do you agree with that?
I do, Senator. There are probably fewer existential threats to the nation, but there are far more ways that middleweight states, non-state actors, and violent extremist groups can reach out and touch us.
Well, I think, do you agree with that, Admiral?
Yes, sir. I would say that there are two definitions of a hollow force. One is the force is larger than the readiness money you have to keep it ready, and that's the more complex definition. The simple one is something that looks really good on the outside, but it's rotten in the middle.
Yeah, well, I wasn't talking about the hollow force. I was talking about the threats that are out there. I think, I look back wistfully at the days of the Cold War. Things are predictable back then. Now, you have entities out there like Iran that even our intelligence says are going to have a weapon and the capability of a delivery system. I mean, that's what he's talking about, and that's the threats that I think it's really, it is a scary thing. The question I'm going to ask you, you both believe that. Have you shared this with the President?
Yes, we have briefed.
So he knows this?
Yes, sir.
And yet he continues with his approach. Let me ask you a question about Gitmo. You said you would welcome any other solution. I've often looked at Gitmo as one of the few good deals we have in this country. We've had since 1904. What, $4,000 a year, I think it is, Mr. Chairman, and they don't collect it half the time. And yet, when you say welcome any other solution, just What other solution? Is there a solution out there that would not entail bringing these people into our continental United States? Either one of you?
I've seen the analysis done at any number of solutions, but there hasn't been any consensus on which one to pursue. I simply want to align myself with those who say we have to have a detention solution.
Well, no, I agree. We have to have a detention. We've got something there that is ready-made. I understand that there are a lot of the people in the Middle East don't like it. It's maybe given us a bad reputation in some areas. But I believe that we need to think of America first. I can recall 4 years ago when the president came out talking about these alternatives that they had. They had sites in the United States. One was in Fort Sill in Oklahoma. I went down there and I talked to a young lady. She was in charge of our prison down there. She had had several tours in Gitmo, and she said, "What's the matter with them up there? Don't they know that we have this? It's ready-made." I have to say this because this is a great frustration to me. Yes, we have language that is pretty good language in the bill, but nonetheless, if either one of you, well, I'll just ask one last question on that. Can you think of anything that would not entail incarceration or movement into the United States right now, off the top of your head?
I don't have an easy answer to that one, Senator. One thing I would mention is that just a little more flexibility, I think, would be useful to us. And I'll give you an example. We have a moral obligation to take good medical care of these detainees. Because we can't move them outside of Gitmo, we have to build very, very state-of-the-art medical facilities.
And I've seen it, and we
It would
have
be
done
great
that.
to be able to move them, briefly back and forth to the United States if they need medical treatment and send them back down there. That's the kind of flexibility.
Well,
I think.
okay, well, that's fine, but
I know that's
we've-
different from what you're
we've
talking
got that. There's not a person up there who hasn't been down there more than once, and one of the big problems they have with the detainees down there is overweight. They're eating better than they've ever eaten in their lives. They have better medical attention. They have tests run that they never even heard of before. So I think we're meeting that. On April 9th, when we stopped the flying, I've talked to each one of you about this, but I think we need to get something on the record. I have an aviation background, and I don't think you have to have that to know that you've got to keep your proficiency up. That was 3 months ago, April 9th. Now, I applaud the decision to now get back in and start retraining. I mentioned in my opening statement that I was going to conduct a study as to how much more it cost us to go through the retraining that we're going to have to go through right now than if we had never made the decision back in April 9th. Have you already done that, or do you have any information in terms of how much more it's going to cost now than if we had not done it to start with?
I think it's a good question, and I think we can easily get that for you for the record in terms of cost. What I can tell you is that if you take one of these squadrons that hasn't been flying at all, it's going to take anywhere from 1 to 3 months for them to bring their proficiency back up just in basic airmanship skills, taking off and landing and that sort of thing. And then probably another 3 months beyond that to get their combat skills back. So it's real. I think of it more in terms of time, but there is a cost to mention, and we can get you that.
Yeah, but time, wouldn't you agree, equals risk at the time we need these. If we don't have we had some of them who came right out of school right around April 9th, who they're going to have to go back and almost start from the beginning now. And when we don't have the capability of taking care of the needs as they come up, I believe that translates into a risk that I'm not willing to take if I can do anything about it.
Senator, can I add?
Sure.
What we're seeing is that we're going to end up with two problems over time if sequestration remains in effect. The immediate problem for the next several years will be readiness, because we will not be able to find the money we need to achieve the level of sequestration cuts without dramatically impacting our readiness. Then, as the force becomes smaller, you can restore readiness because you're dealing with a smaller force. But I think too small. So it goes too far, too fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. The proficiency of a smaller number of units can be greater, but you're still dealing with a smaller number of units. And in this, when we have the diverse threats that we have right now, to me, that's not a very good idea. Not that you can do anything about it, but right now that is a problem. The last question, because my time is up, would be, Admiral, I appreciate the fact that you used the word immoral, and given the current path of readiness in the armed forces, in your professional judgment, when will the Commander-in-Chief be at a point of making immoral decisions?
I don't think I was the one who used the term immoral, but I think that we are keeping the White House closely informed as to the outcome of the Strategic Choices and Management Review. That includes both capability, capacity, and readiness of the force. They are aware of those results, and I'm sure that they're going to factor that into their decision-making on the rest of the budget issues that are in play. And hopefully we will be able to find a good resolution that will allow us to go forward with being able to plan for what the future is.
Well, I appreciate both of you. We have to let the people know that we have a real serious problem here, and I think this hearing is our opportunity to do that. And I apologize in attributing a quote to you that I guess it was General Dempsey who made that quote.
Yeah, it was, sir. And let me assure you that if the nation is threatened, we'll go.
Yeah.
But that's the point. We'll go, and we may not be ready to go. And so it would depend on the nature of the conflict in which we were asked to participate. If it's an existential threat to the nation and we send them, there's no immorality in that. But if this were some other contingency and we were asking young men and women to go not ready, and we had a choice to do
That's
that,
where the
that's right.
morality issue
I
comes
believe.
in. I appreciate that very much, and I agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I join in thanking both of you for your service over many, many years. General Dempsey, you and I have discussed briefly the purchase of helicopters for the Afghan armed services, the purchase of Russian Mi-17s from the export agency controlled by Russia that is now selling arms to Syria, and a country that is still providing refuge to Edward Snowden. And we discussed the reasons for that sale, and very graciously you suggested you would look into the possibility of either ending that sale, which will result in helicopters right now, according to the Inspector General for Afghanistan, sitting on the runways of Afghanistan because they lack pilots to fly them and they lack people trained to maintain or repair them. I wonder whether there is something we can do either to stop those sales, purchases subsidized by American taxpayers, provided by American taxpayers to an ally, supposed ally that still does not have a status of forces agreement with us that will enable us to continue providing aid to them. And I think in connection with that question, what additional kinds of resources we should consider stopping if there is no status of forces agreement.
Senator, on the Mi-17s, I support continuing on the path we're on to get the Afghans as capable as possible by the end of 2014, and that will require us to stay committed to that fleet of Mi-17s. There's no way we could transition at this point and put them in anything other than that airframe. What I suggested to you is that if we can achieve a lasting, enduring relationship with them and live up to if they live up to their end of the deal and we live up to our end of the deal, we'll be investing in them through foreign military sales for some time. And there is a likely point where we could transition them to U.S.-built aircraft. But in the interim period, we cannot, I shouldn't say we cannot. It would be my recommendation that we stay the course with the existing program.
And is that interest sufficient, do you think, to justify the national security waiver under the legislation that's currently included in the National Defense Authorization Act?
I do, sir.
And what would have to change for those helicopters to be purchased from an American manufacturer, such as Sikorsky or any of the others that are more than capable of providing
Right.
better aircraft? to the Afghan.
Right. Well, we've actually have experience in making that transition in Iraq, where we've initially outfitted them with Soviet era aircraft and are now making the transition into an American airframe. And it starts with training and long lead time procurements, but that effort is unlikely to begin until we establish a bilateral security agreement.
Admiral Winnefeld, I was at a briefing recently that you gave, an excellent briefing on threats to our Navy, and I wonder if you could comment to the extent you're able on the importance of the Ohio-class replacement in terms of nuclear deterrence, the importance of continuing with that program, and any possible jeopardy that might be impacted as a result of sequester.
Senator, we are, of course, remain committed to the triad. We believe that's the right approach for nuclear deterrence for this country. And, of course, the fleet ballistic missile submarines are an absolutely essential element of that triad. It's the most survivable element that we have. It's a very reliable platform, a very reliable missile that goes with it. And so we're very committed to the next class coming down the line. I think we've delayed it about as far as we can. We need to now, and we are, getting into the requirements and the design of this missile-carrying submarine. And again, we're just committed to the program. It's terribly important that we get this right. We're going to try to control the costs on it. We're going to try to make this, like all the programs we're working right now, from the beginning, a successful acquisition program. I know that the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics and Sean Stackley with the Navy and the CNO himself are all committed to making this a successful program.
And you'd agree, wouldn't you, that this program really has to be spared any impact as a result of sequester? It's so vital to our national security.
I would agree with that, yes, sir.
General Dempsey, wonder if I could move to a personnel issue that I know, because of your personal commitment to the well-being of our troops, is of great interest to you. The electronic medical record system, which still is incompatible, the Department of Defense medical record system, with the VA record system, despite questions that I and others have asked repeatedly under this Secretary of Defense and the previous one. I remain concerned, to put it mildly, with the fact that interoperability still is a goal, not a reality. And I wonder if you could comment on what can be done to increase the pace of making those two systems compatible. I had thought originally that they would be one system. $1 billion has been spent on making them one system, and I ask you to comment.
Thank you, Senator. I share your concern. I can also assure you that Secretary Hagel, who, as you know, has a background in the Veterans Administration, shares it. He's taken a decision to move the responsibility, the program management, into AT&L, where I think you will see be much better managed. We've done other things, for example, agreed to certify as complete medical records that pass from active duty into the Veterans Administration, which then relieves the burden of them having to do continual research to figure out if the record is complete. That's the path we're on, but your oversight and interest in it will be an important part of achieving it.
Thank you. My time has expired, but I again want to thank you both for your extraordinary service. And just to reiterate, General Dempsey, I remain unhappy, very strongly unhappy, with our current position and posture vis-a-vis those MI-17s, and I am not going to let the issue go. With all due respect, I understand your position, and thank you very much for being so forthright in your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Blumenthal. Senator McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must tell both the witnesses at the onset I'm very concerned about the role you have played over the last 2 years. Your view of your role as the chief advisors to the President on national security and the state of the world over the last 2 years since you have hold the office you hold. General Dempsey and Admiral Winnefeld, do you believe the continued costs and risk of our inaction in Syria are now worse for our national security interests than the costs and risks associated with limited military action?
Senator, as we've discussed,
I'd like to know an answer rather than a filibuster. I have 6 minutes and 10 seconds.
I assure you, Senator, I won't filibuster. This is a regional issue, so I would say that the issue in Syria is we are at greater risk because of the emergence of violent extremist organizations, as is Iraq.
You're not answering the question, General. Do you believe the continued costs and risks of our inaction in Syria are now worse for our national security interests than the costs and risks associated with limited military action?
With all due respect, Senator, you're asking me to agree that we've been inactive, and we have not been inactive.
We have not been inactive.
That's correct.
This, again, gives validity to my concern, because obviously we may have not been inactive, but any observer knows that Bashar Assad is prevailing on the battlefield. 100,000 people have been killed. Hezbollah is there. Russians are there. And the situation is much more dire than it was 2 years ago when you and Admiral Winnefeld came to office. And so your answer is that we haven't been inactive.
That's correct. We haven't used direct military strikes, but we haven't been inactive.
I will ask you for the third time.
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that we should take military action, rather, which is more, has greater risk, our continued limited action or significant action, such as the establishment of a no-fly zone and arming the rebels with the weapons they need, which they haven't been getting, General? I know, perhaps better than you because I've been there. And which do you think is a greater cost? The action that we're taking now, which has had no effect on the battlefield equation, or doing nothing?
Senator, I am in favor of building a moderate opposition and supporting it. The question of whether to support it with direct kinetic strikes is a decision for our elected officials, not for the senior military leader of the nation.
It goes back to my concern about your role as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
I understand.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs is supposed to provide the best advice he can as far as our overall national security is concerned. That's why you are the sole military advisor. You testified this February you had advised the President to arm vetted units of the Syrian opposition. In April, you testified you no longer supported the position. Now we read in published reports that the administration has decided to arm the Syrian opposition units. How do we account for those pirouettes?
I wouldn't accept the term pirouette, sir. I would accept the term that we have adapted our approach based on what we know of the opposition. And if you recall, in the beginning of the year, there was a period where it was pretty evident that the extremist groups were prevailing inside the opposition. So I have not been wavering.
Is your position that the extremist groups are prevailing inside the opposition?
You asked me about February. In February, I had that concern.
So that's your answer to why in February you advised the President to arm them. In April you said that we shouldn't. And then now, obviously, we are arming the rebels. Support that policy?
I support the building of a moderate opposition and including building its military capability.
Here's an example of my concern. Quote, you told CNN on July 8th, the war in Syria is not a simple matter of stopping the fight by the introduction of any particular U.S. capability. Quote, it seems to me that we need to understand what the peace will look like before we start the war. The war has been going on, General Dempsey, to over 100,000 people killed. We didn't start the war, and we wouldn't be starting a war. We would be trying to stop a massacre that's going on. We would try to stop the Hezbollah, who thousands of troops are in. We would try to stop the fact that the Russians continue to supply heavily Bashar Assad's forces, and what would be a great triumph for Iran in the entire region. But you say, it seems to me we need to understand what the peace will look like before we start the war. You think we ought to see how we could stop the war by intervening and stopping the massacre?
Senator, would you agree that we have recent experience where until we understood how the country would continue to govern and that institutions of governance wouldn't fail, that actually situations can be made worse by the introduction of military force?
Actually, General Dempsey, you and I went through this in 2006 when I said that it wasn't succeeding and that we had to have a surge and that only a surge could succeed in reversing the tide of battle, and you disagreed with me then, way back then. And I think history shows that those of us who supported the surge were right, and people like you who didn't think we need a surge were wrong. So I guess my question to you is, is it in any way a good outcome for this situation on the battlefield to continue as it is, with obviously Bashar al-Assad prevailing in a great victory for Iran and continued slaughter of thousands and thousands of people, the destabilization of Jordan, the destabilization of Lebanon, and what is clearly erupting into a regional conflict? Is that your answer?
Senator, somehow you've got me portrayed as the one who's holding back from our use of military force inside of
No, I'm not
Syria.
saying that, General. I'm saying what your advice and counsel is to the President of the United States, and your views are very important because that's your job.
It is. And I've given those views to the President. We've given him options. The members of this committee have been briefed on them in a classified setting. We've articulated the risk. The decision on whether to use force is the decision of our elected officials.
You know, I just asked, the Chairman just asked you if you would give your personal opinion to the committee if asked. You said yes. I'm asking for your opinion.
About the use of kinetic strikes. That issue is under deliberation inside of our agencies of government, and it would be inappropriate for me to try to influence the decision with me rendering an opinion in public about what kind of force we should use.
So your answer to the Chairman's question about giving your personal view is circumscribed by decisions that are still being made.
I will let this committee know what my recommendations are at the appropriate time. Yes, sir.
And when might that be?
Sir, if the administration and the government decides to use military force, we have provided a variety of options, and you know that.
Well, if it is your position that you do not provide your personal views to the committee when asked, only under certain circumstances, then you have just contradicted what I have known this committee to operate under for the last 30 years. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, General. Thank you, Admiral. And I want to get back to Syria in a second. But first I want to ask you, General Dempsey, in regards to mental health services for our service members, one of the things that has recently happened is that at Camp Lejeune, they were reduced by about 50 appointments per month because of the sequestration. And what I was wondering if you know if there has been any increase in suicide or suicide attempts since sequestration took effect.
I don't have that data readily available, Senator. It is a good question. We are aware of some of the reduction in services, and I can take that for the record.
Okay, great. And the follow-up on that would be, are there efforts in place right now to try to minimize the effect on mental health, since it has such a dramatic effect on our service members?
There are any number of efforts, and it's got the attention of not only the department but also the Joint Chiefs. Admiral Winnefeld himself chairs a meeting with the Vice Chiefs of Services. We meet in the tank. We are concerned because although we have prioritized care for wounded warriors, families, and mental health services in the face of declining resources, how that is implemented in the field can sometimes be missed, and so we're alert to it.
Okay. I was in Afghanistan a few months ago and met with our commanders, and at the time we were on all of our metrics. Everything was we were right where we wanted to be as we head toward the end of 2014. And to Admiral and to General, are we still meeting the plan that we had laid out? Are we still being able to hold the towns that we've started to hold? Are we able to turn the Taliban back? Is the plan moving along on schedule? Is it going faster or lesser? Are we meeting the numbers we were hoping to meet as we head toward the end of 2014?
I'll start and see if the Vice wants to add. Besides speaking with General Dunford on a weekly basis and visiting him about quarterly, I also reach out to as many other people as I can possibly reach out to who can give us other views. And so yesterday we had a woman from the Congressional Research Service who had actually spent the last 5 months traveling around Afghanistan, visiting with civilian and military leaders, mostly Afghans. And her report aligned with General Dunford's assessment that we can achieve our military campaign objectives on the timeline that is currently established.
Okay. I appreciate the update because, you know, if we are able to stay on that program, then the Afghan forces have a chance to make this work. To get back to Syria that Senator McCain was talking about, if conditions do not change, does it look to you, as it looks to many, that in the near future, Dara could also fall to the Assad government as well? Whoever it is.
Well, actually, the chairman asked me
And I apologize, I had to step out.
No, sir, I was just reflecting on the fact that there are many people concerned about Dara. I met on Saturday with King Abdullah from Jordan, and I'll be visiting him next week and his leaders as well. And we've got military contingency planning ongoing both back here but also inside Jordan. So yeah, we are concerned about Dara. The conflict tends to ebb and flow. That kind of conflict will always ebb and flow. And so we are watching and making sure that we would have options available to the National Command Authority if necessary.
Well, what steps short of a limited no-fly zone could have the kind of effect that could slow down the Assad forces?
Let me pass that to the Vice because he just did some significant work on this in preparation for his hearing on Tuesday.
Yeah, Senator, there are a whole range of options that are out there.
And the reason I ask that is because I know there's a whole range of options. Yeah. But as you look at everything, the rebel forces are being moved from almost everywhere they're located. And so we have options, but the ball seems to be heading the other way.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into any intelligence community judgments or anything classified in an unclassified hearing, but I think is commonly known that where the rebels are most, the opposition is most on the run right now, is in the central and western part of Syria, around Al-Qusair, which they've lost, around Homs, which is a very difficult situation for them right now. And that also happens to be the most important place, other than Damascus itself probably, for the Syrian regime to regain control of, because that represents the pathway from Damascus into their traditional homeland near the coast. So they really want that back. I believe personally, and it's only my personal judgment, that if the regime is successful in that area, they will next move north to Aleppo, which is the largest city in Syria. It's their commercial center. I don't think they're going to go down to Dara yet, but we've got to watch. We've got to maintain vigilance and discern where this thing is headed next.
And then whether it's Aleppo or Dara, the old saying, and I know there are contingencies, but to not take action is to take action and is determinative of what happens. And so I think there is a concern as to how long does this go on before the momentum becomes irreversible.
And we are ready to act if we're called upon to act. I think the current track that is being pursued by the administration is a diplomatic track, and all manner of other options have been discussed and are continually under discussion, and I would not want to get out in front of the President or anybody else on what choices he might make.
So you're, in effect, you're waiting to hear at this point.
as we should be, we're ready providing every possible
Right.
option we can in case we're called upon to exercise the use of force, which we believe is a political decision.
And in regards to the rebel forces, as you look at them right now, General and Admiral, we've been concerned about al-Nusra and their activities. And do you see the al-Nusra piece growing stronger than the moderate piece? How do you see this moving on a day-to-day basis?
There was a period back in April, as Senator McCain referred, where I was very concerned that the al-Nusra Front, Ahrar al-Sham, there are hundreds of different groups that shift allegiances and alliances on the opposition side, and it makes it very challenging to determine what we're really looking at there. The intel community is hard at it. I'm hard at it. We're hard at it with our regional partners. So there was a period of time when I was fearful that the extremist element, the jihadist, Salafist side of the opposition was gaining considerable strength. Of late, through some efforts that we've made to convince our allies to avoid creating a problem by empowering some of these groups, we've had some success at that. We've also had some success at identifying more clearly a part of the opposition that could be built and trained not only militarily. This is the point I really want to make sure resonates. This opposition has to not only be prepared militarily, but it has to be prepared if it achieves a position of governance inside of Syria. Otherwise, the situation will deteriorate even further.
General, Admiral, thank you for your service. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Donnelly. Now, before I call on Senator Wicker, Senator Inhofe has a very brief comment.
Just a brief clarification. I was told by my staff when I came back that I might have been misunderstood in my comments about Gitmo. I'm probably, arguably, the strongest supporter of opening it up, using it to its fullest capacity, just for not just incarceration, but for trials. And the language that is in the bill, I know, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your good faith efforts in the language that was in there, but I am against the language that's in the NDAA. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to state that.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Dempsey, welcome back. Let's talk about the situation in Egypt. There's been disagreement in Washington about the wisdom of continuing to provide assistance to the Egyptian military in light of recent events there. When I look at Egypt, I don't see very many Jeffersonian Democrats. But I believe the Egyptian military has acted with great professionalism and restraint throughout the 3 years of difficult transition since the 2011 ouster of Hosni Mubarak. I believe one of the primary reasons there's not been far more bloodshed and suffering during this time of transition is the support the United States has provided to Egypt through foreign military sales and military-to-military cooperation. In light of recent events, some have called for the end of these programs. Let me tell you how I feel about this and our commitments under the Camp David Accords, and then let you respond. First, we must maintain the strength of this relationship to enable us to assist and influence Egypt's military leaders. Second, the United States would be short-sighted to overlook the return on investment we get from the Egyptian military. For example, Suez Canal transits for our carrier battle groups, intelligence cooperation, counterterrorism cooperation. These are examples of the benefits we derive from this relationship. Third, the Egyptian military has played a stabilizing role during Egypt's transition. And fourth, our commitments under the Camp David Accords have yielded sustainable peace between Israel and Egypt. We must acknowledge Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement this weekend on Face the Nation that the Camp David Accords have been, quote, the cornerstone of peace between us and our neighbors, and it's also been the cornerstone of stability in the Middle East, unquote. General Dempsey, do you agree with me regarding the importance of military-to-military relationships as enablers of U.S. foreign policy?
I do, Senator.
And do you agree with me that we should continue to maintain and foster the strength of U.S.-Egyptian military relationship?
I do. If our government decides that they have to take some action based on existing legal frameworks and restrictions, I would recommend that we find a way to restore those as quickly as possible, even if it meant conditioning them some way. But I very strongly believe we have to maintain our contact with the Egyptian Armed Forces.
And do you have any reason to believe, as some have feared, and as some fear now, that weapons and equipment that we provide to the Egyptians, or that we have provided in the past, have been used or will be used or would be used in ways that might eventually endanger the United States military or civilian personnel or United States interests?
There's no indication at this point, Senator, that that would be a concern.
And in your opinion, was the elected government of Mohamed Morsi moving toward a dictatorship?
If I could, I'd like to use this opportunity to express my conversations with my counterpart. I can tell you they very strongly believe that.
Okay, well, let me just ask you then, before I move on to another topic. I made some pretty emphatic statements. Would you like to elaborate? I'll give you an opportunity to elaborate on what you've said about the relationship that we've had and the assistance and the sales that we've had with the Egyptian military.
Thank you. It goes, my own personal experience with it goes back to when I commanded CENTCOM in 2008. And I can tell you that they have, they're a very strong partner of the United States, a very key nation in the region. As you put it yourself, we enjoy preferential passage in the Suez, dynamic overflight. They've committed to the Camp David Accords. The Israeli military considers the Egyptian military a strong partner. And so in my personal experience, which goes back now about 5 years, they are worth the investment.
Now, with regard then to Syria, the chairman talked in his opening statement about a post-Assad solution, the negotiated solution. Do you agree that unless the momentum shifts, and I think Senator Donnelly was concerned about this also, unless the momentum shifts back toward the rebels, there is hardly any chance for that sort of solution that the chairman seeks and is hoping for?
Yeah, I agree. I think that as the momentum ebbs and flows, each side feels itself more compelled or less compelled to seek a negotiated settlement. Sure.
So if I can, I think you answered a question from the chairman about ways in which military support could be gotten to the rebels. And I think he asked about enabling other governments to support the military efforts if we're unable or politically or unwilling to do so. Do you remember that question?
I do.
Can you elaborate at all, or is that something you just don't feel comfortable talking about?
No, I'm comfortable talking about the commitment to improve the capabilities of the opposition, and there's any number of ways to do it directly.
The military capability.
That's correct. But you've also heard me say it's not just about improving or enhancing their military capability.
I understand that, but that's what my question is about. So.
Yes, sir. And of course, other nations as well. And there's a significant diplomatic effort to bundle our efforts together into something that will increase the pace at which their capability could be increased.
Could you elaborate as to who these allies might be that are a little more willing?
I would rather do that in a classified setting, Senator.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Reid is going to yield momentarily to another senator who is next in line, who I believe is Senator Gillibrand. Senator Reid is going to yield just for one turn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your public service, for your dedication, for all that you do for our military and for our nation. I'd like to first focus and continue the conversation on Syria. I have grave concerns over the broader regional security in the Middle East, particularly when we're seeing the continued influx of jihadi and Hezbollah fighters into Syria. So I want to talk a little bit about what this means for Syria's neighbor. Obviously, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran has been able to have an influence at Israel's border. Will Iran be able to do the same with regard to Syria in your estimation? And what can we do to prevent both a jihadi haven as well as a stronghold for Iran through Hezbollah in Syria?
I'll take this, and then if the Vice Chairman wants to add, because we've been, it won't surprise you, deeply involved in this issue collaboratively. So, first of all, you're exactly right to think of this as a regional issue, Senator. And I'd add that Iran is not just a challenge to the United States in its nuclear aspirations, but also through its surrogates, its proxies, its arms sales. And so there is, and they're trying to foment a sectarian conflict that runs from Beirut to Damascus to Baghdad. The approach to that, the strategy that would underpin our efforts should be regional, therefore, which means we need to increase our support of the Lebanese armed forces on one side, of the Iraqi armed forces on the other, and of our Jordanian and Turkish partners on the northern and southern flank.
With regard to the broader question on Iran specifically, I've heard both cautious optimism and grave concern about the election of Rouhani as the new president. What is your assessment of the impact of the election? Do you expect his election to change Iran's nuclear policy or its international policies? What's your initial assessment?
First of all, I reflect back on former Secretary Gates' oft-quoted remark of he's looking for the elusive Iranian moderate. Rouhani does have a reputation for being a moderate. He's made some moderate statements since he's been elected, but he's not in office yet. And, there are those of us who have the opinion he's going to struggle a little bit against a very, very conservative central government leadership led by the Supreme Leader that may prevent him from, if he wants to be a moderate, to becoming one. So I think the real watchword here is prudence. It makes sense to potentially reach out to him, see where he's coming from, but not to do so naively. And I don't think anybody's going to do that. I think we're in a good position here. But it's an interesting development. Nobody really expected him to be elected. At the same time, again, the elusive Iranian moderate, we need to maintain the pressure that we're maintaining on the regime and make it very clear to them what our objectives are. Number one, that they not develop a nuclear weapon.
Okay, thank you. Turning now to cyber, both of you have testified that you believe that cyber is a growing threat and a serious concern for our military and for our national security and for our economy. We've been working on a bipartisan basis on a bill called the Cyber Warrior Act. Senator Vitter and Senator Blunt are leading the charge for the Republican side in order to create a National Guard unit that is dedicated solely to cyber defense of our nation as a way to get some of our best and brightest from the private sector who are dedicated to the military and the defense of this country to be able to use their talents more efficiently in a more cost-efficient manner as well. Can I have your opinions on what the impact of creating these units would be with their dual status and whether that would be in the end, better for our defense and for growing this talent in-house?
Well, I'll go first, and then again, this is one where the Vice has also been deeply involved. First of all, you have our commitment to seek to figure out what are the various roles in all the components of our military and all the branches of service. Without making a firm commitment right now on that particular approach, I will say that each of the service chiefs is taking a look at it and under the advice of our cyber commander and strat commander. By the way, you say it's a growing concern. It's here right now. Yeah. And so there is urgency to this, and I think you understand that. We'd have to understand what the cyber role would be for a guardsman. There really would be no role in a Title II authority. There is no Title II authority for cyber. Mm-hmm. So it's really Title X. But go ahead, Sandy.
I'd say it's been an interesting idea that we have looked at and we're committed to looking at. We are growing our cyber force by a considerable amount. It's probably the only part of our force that's going to grow under current budget conditions. We need this new force to do a number of things for us, principally to help us defend our own networks inside the Department of Defense, to help defend the nation against cyber attacks. Obviously, law enforcement, Department of Homeland Security have the lead there, but we play an important role in assisting them. And then there's the potential for offensive cyber operations in support of a combatant commander if we end up finding ourselves in a war. Where the National Guard fits into those three niches is something we need to study and look at. We are short of money. It's going to cost a lot to develop this capability in the Guard, and it's not there all the time for us. But then again, I think you make a fair point that there is expertise out there
that we want.
Tap
yeah.
on. So I just think we need to look very closely, very soberly at whether this makes sense financially and
Well, I'd like to
tactically.
work with you both on this issue. We've obviously been spending a lot of time on sexual assault in the military. It's something everyone cares deeply about solving. One of the things I want to get your thoughts on, obviously the military's had a change of position on its view towards Article 60, that we can actually take Article 60 authority outside the chain of command and still maintain good order and discipline, still maintain command climate, command control. Why do you think removing Article 30 would be different in any way? Because I would imagine that that second legal decision would not have a differing impact than removing Article 60.
Article 6, the approach to Article 60 was because we had put in place over time in our judicial system other mechanisms, military judges and prosecutors, and an appeal process that allowed us to consider changing the authorities of a convening authority to change a ruling after the fact. But that's different than, it seems to us, different than taking the actual offense out of the UCMJ. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to me is to make sure that there's an active deterrent out there that somebody who is contemplating or sexual assault knows that they're going to be caught, that they're going to be prosecuted, and if they're prosecuted, they're going to be punished. It's the same thing that's worked in the drug world for us and the like. And so, as you know, it's our strong view that the commander is responsible for that.
But I would argue that the commander is still responsible for that, because keeping in a number of the articles like Article 134, other articles that are general crimes, you are still fundamentally responsible for command climate, good order and discipline, for any type of infraction of any part of the UCMJ, the commander is responsible for. So you have to set the climate where this assault and rape's not going to happen, where they can not be retaliated against, and where they will report. The only difference is the legal judgment. That weighing of evidence and facts will now be done by a trained, objective military prosecutor.
I'd like to give you a couple of numbers on what the Army has discovered recently, and peeling back the numbers on what a so-called objective observer might end up with. The Army has looked back over the last 2 years and has found 35 cases where a civilian district attorney refused to take a sexual assault case, refused to take the case. And the chain of command in the military insisted that the case be taken inside the military chain of command. Of those 35 cases, there are 14 out there that are not yet resolved. They're still in the court system. Of the remainder, of the 25, of the 35 that are complete, I'm sorry, there are actually 49. Of the 35 complete, 25 resulted in a court-martial conviction. That's a 71% conviction rate, which is about, the civilian rate is around 18 to 22%. So of those 71% that were convicted, 24 of the 25 got punitive discharges. They are doing prison time. Okay, so if the Army hadn't taken those 49 cases and the 35 where we've achieved a conviction, those people would be walking the street right now. The victims would not have had the resolution that they deserved in this case. This was done inside the chain of command insisting that a prosecution be pursued, and it was pursued successfully. I worry that if we turn this over to somebody else, whether it's a civilian DA or a non-entity in the military, that they're going to make the same kind of decisions that those civilian prosecutors made. So I worry that we're going to have fewer prosecutions if we take it outside the
Well,
chamber.
we want prosecutions that are going to result in guilty verdicts, and weighing these kinds of evidence is very difficult, and that's why being trained to know what kind of cases you can bring forward and win is so important. But moreover, you may have helped a handful of victims. We're still having 23,000 victims who don't feel the system is strong enough, objective enough, and transparent enough to even report. So if we're going to address the 23,000 cases as opposed to the handful where a judgment of a commander might have helped, we need to change the system. But my time's expired.
And by the way, thanks, Senator. I hope you know we actually embrace this discussion.
Thank you for your service and thoughtfulness.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of you for being here and your families for your distinguished service to our country. And General Dempsey, I want to thank you for your recent visit to New Hampshire. It really meant a lot to our men and women in uniform. And they said to me after that it really said so much about your leadership to go hear from those on the ground, and also at our shipyard, our civilian workforce. They deeply appreciated it, so thank you. I wanted to ask you yesterday, I was deeply troubled by a report that came out from GAO about the POW MIA accounting command, and that report actually said that unfortunately the leadership weaknesses and fragmented organizational structure is undermining the important function of JPAC, and of course, with more than 83,000 of our country's heroes remaining missing or unaccounted for from past conflicts, including 49 from New Hampshire and for Vietnam and Korea, I believe we have a moral obligation to those we have left behind. And this follows up a recent AP report that found that an internal study that was done at DOD found that this effort, JPAC, was so inept, mismanaged, and wasteful that it risked descending from dysfunction to total failure. And there were allegations that this internal study had been suppressed by DOD. So I would like to ask you, General Dempsey, what are we going to do about this, and how are we going to make sure that we fulfill our responsibility to those who have served our country and have been left behind so that they understand that they are not forgotten?
First, Senator, thanks for the hospitality last week. And I assure you, I always get more than I give on those visits to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and all the components. Well, this is a new report to us as well. I can tell you, though, that the Secretary of Defense, while on travel, called me up to make sure that I had been made aware of it and to tell me that when he got back and when I complete this process of hearings and office calls, that he wants to get to the bottom of it. So, I mean, it's so new, but it's so discouraging, and moving rapidly toward disgraceful. So I assure you, we will get at it. Now, we got a new commander out there, and I can also tell you that he is seized with this as well.
And I would ask, I've written the chairman, and I hope that we could have, whether in the committee or the larger, with the full committee, a hearing on this, because I believe it's that important to get to the bottom of some of the issues that have been raised by this GAO report and the internal report. I would like to ask you, Chairman, the chairman and the ranking member of this committee wrote to Secretary Hagel on May 2nd of 2013, and we have heard testimony both in the Readiness Subcommittee and every subcommittee within this committee about the impacts of sequestration. And in that letter, the chairman asked you to produce, or the Department of Defense to produce, a package of reductions for fiscal year 2014 defense budget that would be the most workable approach for meeting the $52 billion in reductions required by sequestration under the Budget Control Act. We did receive a response recently from Secretary Hagel, but it doesn't really answer our question on the specifics. Have you put together a contingency plan for the $52 billion in reductions required by sequestration in the year 14?
The services are, having received their fiscal guidance about 2 weeks ago, are preparing that contingency right now, and it will be a contingency that addresses both the President's budget submission and also the sequestration.
We had asked for this in July, and I'm hoping that this, can you give me a commitment as to when will this be produced to us, this committee, so that we can understand the impacts of sequestration, and we can also share it with our colleagues about what it really means in terms of the impact of the readiness of our forces.
I can probably help a little
Yeah,
bit.
go ahead.
It's a very fair question. The answer that came back was the first contours of what FY14 execution would look like under those conditions. It's important for us to kind of keep in mind that there are about 5 things the service planners, budget planners, are having to go through right now. They're going through what 14 is going to look like under the conditions that were asked for in the letter. They're finalizing what execution would look like under the President's budget. They're also having to develop 2 or 3 different scenarios for the FY15 to 19 budget. And these people are furloughed 1 day a week. So it's a little tough to produce fine detail that quickly, but the services have been given the task, and I believe that you'll see, they'll have an execution plan before the 1st of October, and you'll have it. You'll see it.
We need it sooner, and let me just say that you can do all the planning you want for the President's budget, but it's pie in the sky right now. The reality is of the law is the sequestration, and until the American people understand, and everyone here understands what the real impact of that is, that's why I'm hoping that you will make that the priority. And I know I don't have that much time, but I want to ask you, Chairman and the Vice Chairman, about Russia, and in particular, I saw a recent report that Russia is in violation of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Is that true?
That is something that we can't address in an unclassified hearing, but I'd be happy to get into a discussion with you in a more classified setting to go through. The point being that we have very good verification methods in place. We watch this very closely. We believe that they are in compliance with the START treaty, and I need to leave it at that in this setting.
Okay, I will follow up because I'm not asking about the START treaty.
I understand.
And the reason that I'm asking this is because here's where we are with Russia. A post-mortem conviction of Sergei Magnitsky, the human rights, who was, of course, tortured and killed for bringing out corruption within the government, to put in your face with the United States. They've not ruled out granting asylum to Edward Snowden. And just today there was a report that one of Putin's chief opponents, Navalny, a candidate for the mayor of Moscow, was convicted, and it really reeks of using the judicial system for Putin to punish his opponents. And so when I look at that context, one thing that concerns me is that our posture with Russia, if they are in violation of their treaty obligations, that's an important issue. One final question, Admiral. The President recently announced that he would be considering further reductions to our nuclear arsenal. Do you believe that we should do that unilaterally?
Senator, the advice that we have given to the President is that we not do that unilaterally, that we do it as part of a negotiated package of reductions.
If there were going to be unilateral reductions, would you oppose those reductions?
I would not give that advice to the President that we do a unilateral reduction.
So you would advise against a unilateral reduction in our nuclear deterrent?
We already have.
Okay, appreciate that.
And there's 3 things, Senator. There's the, through negotiations, preserve the triad and modernize the stockpile.
My time is up, but I think given the behavior of Russia, I think it is at best naive to think that we're going to be able to negotiate any kind of further reductions, which I would oppose. I don't think that is the right direction for the protection of this country. But in light of what I just described, and obviously we can't discuss it in this setting, but if we find out that they're in violation of other treaty obligations, coupled with their other behavior, I don't see how we can expect good faith negotiations from the Russians at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ayotte. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service to the nation and to your family service, because it's evident you can't do this alone. General Dempsey, one of your statutory duties is to provide your formal military advice on the strategic environment and military activities needed to address that environment through the Chairman's risk assessment. And given the current world environment, which seems to be changing minute by minute, Senator Ayotte just detailed what's happened in the last 24 hours with respect to the Russians. What changes would you make today to your risk assessment that you submitted in April?
Thanks, Senator. The first thing I think you've probably noticed is we changed the one we submitted in April, which previously it had been an accumulation of combatant commander requirements. And by the way, and this is to Senator Inhofe's point earlier, since I've been chairman over the past 2 years, the requirements that the combatant commanders have submitted have actually increased in PACOM, in CENTCOM, and in AFRICOM notably. So it's to the point about increasing risk, declining readiness. And we changed it to try to align what we're doing with national security interests, unprioritized, because that's not our responsibility to prioritize them. And we made an estimate of what we are doing across the globe that is being placed at risk, and we also looked inside the services at how the health of the force is evolving. In that document, I made mention of the fact that this document didn't account for sequestration, and that once that became a reality, that I would have to revise my risk assessment. I will have to do so to align with the submission that Senator Ayat just described.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Winnefeld, my colleagues, particularly Senator Gillibrand, have done an extraordinary service to the nation and to the military by pointing out that despite years of effort, we have a significant sexual abuse problem in the military. And we have to, as you both clearly indicated, we have to not rhetorically but fundamentally respond to this. One aspect we focused on has been the judicial system, but some of my experience suggests that there are other levers that are critical to the climate, the command structure, the performance of the military, and they include evaluation, promotion, and retention. And that if we do not focus on those areas also, then we'll never have the kind of force that we need and the trust that we need among the men and women who serve in that force. Can you comment on that? I know you and your colleagues have taken a sort of a leadership role in dealing with this issue.
In terms of promotion and the...
How do we make this so that every day someone thinks about, their responsibilities, not, there's a judicial process out there, but this is how this is what expected of me, to stay in the force, to succeed in the force, and to have the force succeed.
There are a lot of, an enormous number of aspects of that answer, but I'll touch on a few. The most important thing, and Senator Gillibrand touched on this, is the command climate that we hold commanders responsible for establishing that makes the likelihood of a sexual assault drop down hopefully to zero. And there are all number of aspects. It's about teaching people what a heinous crime this is. It's about reporting it if you see it. It's about intervening if you see it about to happen. A whole host of measures that commanders must take to establish the climate inside their commands. And we need to hold commanders accountable for establishing that climate, and we intend to. That's one of the reasons why the command climate surveys now are going to be seen, which we normally haven't done, by the next echelon up in the chain of command. And if that next echelon up detects a problem, that the climate is not where it needs to be, then action can be taken, and it can be even entered into somebody's evaluation as a sort of a downstrike, as you will. So in keeping with the prevention and the advocacy, investigation, accountability, and assessment pieces of what we're trying to do to take on this pernicious issue, it's absolutely vital that the climate piece of it come to the forefront and that we hold commanders responsible for that.
Thank you very much. General Dempsey, can you comment on the current level of cooperation between the government of Kabul and NATO, ISAF command? Every day we seem to be another sort of example of friction rather than harmony.
The relationship with notably the president of Afghanistan is scratchy. I think is probably as good a word as I could describe it. He is addressing what he describes as issues of sovereignty, and we're trying to close the gap on what an enduring presence and commitment might look like.
Thank you. And Admiral Winnefeld, in terms of the recent discovery of contraband coming out of Cuba to North Korea, do you have a kind of a rough assessment of at this juncture? Was it the Cubans trying simply to rehabilitate their equipment, or were they trying to get equipment to North Korea so the North Koreans could use it?
It's a little hard to tell at this point. The intelligence community is still evaluating that. It would be easy to come to the conclusion that under the guise of returning equipment to North Korea for repair, that in fact these are jet engines and missiles that would be going to North Korea to replenish their stocks or what have you. In either case, it clearly exposes North Koreans' willing defiance of the international community and United Nations Security Council resolutions and the like. We're very glad that the Panamanians discovered this so that we can once more expose to the world the cynical behavior of the North Korean regime.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service. Chairman Dempsey, the Russian president said, I think a couple of days ago, that if he thought hurting U.S. relationships, U.S.-Russian relationships would be a consequence of granting Snowden asylum, he wouldn't do it. What would your advice be to the Russian president about granting Snowden asylum?
I think that there would be consequences across all of our relationships, military, economic.
It would be damaging and not do it. Would that be your advice?
I think it would be, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. The Prime Minister of Israel was on national television on the Face of the Nation Sunday, and he said the following things about Iran. There's a new president in Iran. He believes he's criticizing his predecessor for being a wolf in wolf's clothing. His strategy is be a wolf in sheep's clothing, smile and build a bomb. Admiral Winnefeld, do you agree with that analysis?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I certainly would agree that we're looking for
Is there
elusive.
any doubt in your mind that this guy is actually a moderate?
We're looking for the elusive Iranian moderate, as Secretary
Now, my
of State
question to you, and this will determine how I vote for you.
Yeah.
Do you believe the current president of Iran is a moderate?
He doesn't have a history of being a moderate, no,
So
sir.
I'll take that as no. The United States should ratchet up the sanctions and make it clear to Iran that they won't get away with it. And if sanctions don't work, then they have to know that you'll be prepared, us, the United States, to take military action. That's the only thing that will get their attention. Do you agree with the Israeli Prime Minister about the threat of military force against the Iranian nuclear program? Maybe the only thing to get their attention. Admiral Dempsey. Excuse me, General Dempsey. Sorry.
That's been our approach all along, sir, so yes.
Okay, great. So we're all on the same sheet of paper there, that if they don't believe we're going to hit them, they're going to move. Here's what he said about all the problems in the Mideast, summed up this way. All the problems that we have, however important, will be dwarfed by this messianistic, apocalyptic, extreme regime that would have an atomic bomb. It would make a terrible, a catastrophic change for the world and for the United States. Do you agree with his assessment of how important it is not to allow the Iranians to get a nuclear weapon?
I do, and that's what we've said.
Great. All right. Now, as to Afghanistan, the current commander suggested that a 12,000-member force, two-thirds being U.S., the other 4,000 being NATO, not counting American Special Forces troops, soft capability, would be a reasonable number to leave behind in terms of a follow-on force. Does that make sense to you? Is he in the ballpark? Does that make sense?
He is, and we've said so at NATO in various
Thank
sessions.
you very much. That's encouraging. Do you agree with me that it would be a wise investment to keep the Afghan Army at 352,000, at least for a few more years, rather than draw them down to 232?
I do.
Thank you. Syria. Could Syria, is Assad winning?
Currently, the tide seems to have shifted in his favor.
You agree with that, Admiral Winnefeld?
I'd say specifically the tide has shifted in his favor in the central and western part of the country. It's very fragile in the north, and they're hanging
Is
in
he
there.
winning overall or not?
I think if I were to have to pick who's winning, it would be the regime, but not by much right now.
Okay, well, let's... All right, so the regime is winning, but not by much. Could they be winning without Russia's help?
I think the most important help they're getting, sir, is Iranian and Hezbollah, but And so I don't know whether Russians' help is vital, but it's certainly helping them. No question.
General Dempsey, how would you evaluate the significance of Russia's help to Assad?
Through their foreign military sales, they are arming.
Let's put it this way. If the Russians said, we want you gone tomorrow, would it matter to Assad?
Absolutely.
It would be a game changer, wouldn't it, Admiral Winnefeld?
I certainly do, but Assad is he's going to fight to the death, I think.
Do you agree with me that if Russia said to Assad, we no longer support you, it would be the ultimate game changer?
It would be a very important game changer.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you see Russia doing that?
No, sir.
Okay. If he stays versus him going, what's the most catastrophic outcome for us? If he wins over time and he doesn't leave versus having to deal with the fact that we kicked him out because we said he had to go. What's worse for us? Him staying or going?
Well, we've said that it is the nation's policy that Assad must go.
So that means it's worse for us for him to stay and we not be able to achieve our policy. Do you agree with that?
That's my interpretation.
Okay. Do you agree with that, Admiral Winnefeld?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Will he be in power next year if nothing changes? Your best military advice, if we keep just where we're at, Iran's helping him, do you agree they're all in and helping Assad?
I do.
Do you agree that Hezbollah is helping Assad?
Absolutely.
Do you agree that Russia is helping Assad?
Yes.
If nothing changes, if we don't change our game, will he be in power a year from now?
I think likely so.
Okay. What would that mean for the King of Jordan? Will he be in power a year from now?
As I've said, I've met with him, and he's concerned that the demographics in his nation.
Right, you're dead right. He told me he didn't think he'd be here another year because there'd be 1 million Syrian refugees and it's destabilizing Jordan. Do you agree with that?
That's his concern. That's
Okay.
right.
What would that mean for the region and us if the King of Jordan is gone a year from now and Assad's in power a year from now? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
He's a strong ally. It'd be a bad thing.
It'd be a horrible thing for the Mideast, wouldn't it?
Yes.
If this war in Syria keeps going on and Assad's still in power a year from now, what effect would it have on Iraq?
It's already destabilizing Western Iraq.
Iraq would just begin to fall apart at a faster rate. Do you agree with that? Because it's destabilizing the country.
That would certainly be a possible scenario.
From the Israelis' point of view, the likelihood of Hezbollah getting Russian-made advanced weapons, if he's still in power a year from now, does that go up or down?
From the Israeli standpoint,
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. From Israel's standpoint, one of the worst nightmares for them, short of an Iranian nuclear weapon, would be Hezbollah getting advanced weapons sold to Assad by Russia, and that likelihood would go up if he's still in power a year from now?
Yes.
Okay. We'll talk the second round about sequestration. Thank you both for your answers.
If we can finish the first round by noon, at least there would be a very brief second round. That's my current intention, which I've shared with the ranking member. Senator McCaskill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just when I think we've made real progress on wartime contracting, something happens and I realize that we have still miles to go before we really have got a handle on this. And the latest incident that's come to my attention is that the
Programming authority to get that done in FY13 to keep the SDD effort on track. Because of the importance of this program, we're doing everything we can to protect the numbers as the department finalizes the Lot 6 and 7 prices, and I don't want to stray outside of my authority. This is really Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L lane, but we are committed to this program, and we really want to ramp up production as soon as we can to get the economies of scale that we need in order to make this a productive program. So the F-35 is a very important program to us. There's no question about it.
It's also my understanding on sequestration that the DOD civilian supervisors, they received notice just recently that if they have knowledge that the employees that report to them work more than the allotted hours during their furloughs, even when it's voluntary on their part, that those supervisors, these civilian supervisors, are subject to fines up to $5,000 and potential jail time. And when I realized that, there are legal guidelines, I know, that have to be followed, We certainly don't want to have furloughed employees to have to involuntarily work without pay, but to me, this seems to go too far. And so I'm troubled that these supervisors could face these unbelievable penalties because they've got motivated workers who really are dedicated to the national security of our country despite the furloughs, and we can't fault them when they want to continue their mission, once again, because Congress has not acted. So what are your thoughts on this matter, and how does one find the right balance here?
Well, first of all, Senator, I would make a shout out to our civilian employees in the department who are fantastic. These are people who, under ordinary conditions, work extra hours because they believe so much in what they're doing, and they're just tremendous. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have the legal background to this. I believe that the restrictions you're referring to when you're furloughed are legal restrictions, and I think we're just trying to stay within the letter of the law. But I couldn't agree with you more on the overall principle and the sentiment that these are American patriots who want to do the best they can for their country. We're cutting out, a day's pay, and they still want to do work for us. I mean, what more can you ask for from these great folks? So the sooner we can resolve this, the better. I know the department is working hard, if we can, to reduce the number of furlough days this year. There are no guarantees. The comptroller is working on that, but it's a real tragic situation for these great Americans.
And even these legal ramifications, they're not supposed to even look at their BlackBerries on the days of furlough. Goodness. The previous 2 quadrennial defense reviews have mandated significant growth in our special operation forces and enablers that directly support their operations. Admiral Winnefeld, in response to the committee's pre-hearing policy questions, you said, given the financial downturn that we face, we must balance the need for soft capabilities with our need to address other capability demands in light of increased budgetary pressures. Do you believe that previously directed growth in the size of SOF should be retained despite the current budgetary pressures? And how should special operation capabilities be prioritized compared to the other capability demands that you referenced?
I have to be quite honest in telling you that if we get into the full BCA caps, the full sequester, what we call sequester forever in the department, that we're probably going to have to level off soft growth because there are so many other programs that are going to be shrinking in size. It's sort of the philosophy, if you're level, then you're doing pretty well in this budget environment. If you're growing, it's really unusual. The only thing I know of that will grow will be the cyber forces, and everything else is going to be coming down in size. So I think keeping it in perspective that leveling off SOF is probably about as good as we can do if we get to the full BCA cuts.
Even with the demands that we see around the world today?
Even with the demands, and our SOF forces are fantastic. They're doing very important work around the world, no question. We have considerable amount of SOF forces in Afghanistan doing counterinsurgency. That will end at the end of 2014. We were hoping to take that capacity and bring it home and do a couple of important things with us. One is to rest the force a little bit. These folks have been going very hard for the last decade. Another would be to enhance our building partnership capacity efforts across the world. We certainly want to rest the force. We may have to trim back a little bit on the building partnership capacity just because of the budget cuts. And again, leveling off is, you're pretty lucky if you're only leveling off under these circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hagan. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Dempsey and Admiral Winnefeld, thank you both very much for your service to this country and for your willing to continue to serve under what are very difficult times. General Dempsey, I very much appreciate your coming to New Hampshire and your visiting both Pease and our National Guard and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and meeting with a number of the businesses in New Hampshire that help make up part of the great defense industrial base we have in this country. Many people on the committee have expressed their concerns about sequestration. I know it's something that you both care very much about. One of the things that we heard from the businesses in the meeting that you had in New Hampshire was their concern about the uncertainty and what that means in terms of their future ability to provide the support that our military needs in order to do their job. I wonder if you could speak to whether this is something you're hearing from other parts of the country, and then how concerned you are that continuing cuts from sequestration might have a very damaging impact on the defense industrial base in this country.
Thank you, Senator. What I found most interesting in that roundtable was two things. The big corporations, well, I won't name names, but the big corporations have enough flexibility that they can kind of weather the storm and are likely to still be there when we need them. It's the small businesses who don't have that kind of flexibility, who I think we risk losing in two ways. One is I suspect they'll look, well, they said it, they're going to look increasingly overseas. And the second thing they said was that their ability to innovate is being reduced. And so we're losing in several ways that I think could have a long-term negative effect.
Thank you. The other thing you have both talked about is the importance of the people who serve this country, both who serve actively in the armed forces as well as those people who support your mission in the civilian capacity. And one of the concerns that I have had is relative to the workers that we have who have the degrees in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. And looking at the statistics for the people we will need to do the work of our military and its support in the future, the statistics don't look very good, because an average age of an aerospace worker in the industry is 44. 26% of the aerospace workforce became eligible for retirement in 2008. 50% of the Navy's science and technology professionals will be retirement eligible by 2020. And those statistics go on. So can either of you speak to concerns that you have about how sequestration might be affecting our ability to recruit the people who have the degrees and the skills that we're going to need in the future? If we're looking at sequestration, not just in 2013, but 2014, 2015, 2016 for the next 9 years, what does that do to our civilian workforce that supports your mission?
I'll ask the Vice in a moment here, but reflecting back to the trip to the Portsmouth Naval Yard, one of the other things I was unaware of was the apprenticeship program, where they take some of the folks with the skill set that you describe, and 30 of them, as I remember, some significant number from incredible schools in the Northeast, notably, and they build into them this passion for what that I saw in the workforce there in support of the United States Navy, and in fact in support of the Coast Guard as well. It's going to be simply a matter of mathematics. They're going to do less of that, and so I think we will lose some of those.
Fundamentally, the real challenge we have under the worst sequester scenario is the steepness of this cut. And what we found over time, and we understand very well this time around, is that it's very hard to get force structure out quickly. Force structure meaning people. We can't get people out fast enough. And what that means is the only other levers you have are readiness and modernization. And readiness and modernization are very technical things. So we will be jettisoning, basically, a number of modernization programs or vastly trimming them down, and we'll be reducing readiness, which includes depots, work, and that sort of stuff, which is also technical. So I worry about that. The other thing is that as we get smaller, the tendency under the rules we have is that the last person in is the first person out. And so that's our seed corn, all these young, technically adept folks that are thinking of coming in or are already in. If they're the first to go, we're going to lose them. And then we're going to have the effects that you talked about, where we have a force that stays and retires, and there's nothing to backfill them. So it really is something we've got to watch closely. I know Frank Kendall's worried about it. I know Ash Carter's worried about it, and it's something we've got to be very mindful of as we move forward.
Thank you. I certainly share that concern. Let me ask you both. One of the things that Senator McCain and I have worked on that is language both in the immigration reform bill that passed the Senate as well as in the Defense Authorization Act that this committee has done would deal with the number of Afghans and Iraqis who have been helpful to the United States and the international force, who are concerned about their safety once we get past 2014 and the NATO force withdraws. I wonder if you could talk about how concerned you are about that and what kind of message it would send to other people in the future who might be willing to cooperate with us in these kinds of conflicts if we're not able to help provide safety for those people who have cooperated.
Yeah, having lived with those men and women, I strongly support the effort, but let me turn it over to the Vice, who's been tracking it most closely.
Just to give you a sense, actually yesterday we had a Deputies Committee meeting that I was unable to attend but sent someone on this exact issue, special immigrant visas and the like, to get these folks in who have really literally risked their lives to enable our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it has the attention of the National Security Staff, it has our attention, and we'll continue to push it in the right direction. And I would just say, if you hear anything that is making you uncomfortable, don't hesitate to talk to us. We'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, and I know that Senator McCain and I stand ready to be of any help we can, and I know it has the support of this committee as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Sessions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership of this committee, and you lead us in a way that gets most of us to vote together every time we bring a bill out. And I think that's a testament to bipartisanship in the defense of America. General Dempsey particularly, I just want to ask you to reaffirm, and I know you will do so, but reaffirm your responsibility to share with this committee and Congress your best military judgment about matters, and that you will internally, when asked by the Commander-in-Chief to give your opinion, you will give your best unvarnished military opinion and not be influenced by politics or pressures of any kind.
I can assure you that that is what has been my intent and will remain my intent in the future.
Adam Winnefeld, would you likewise?
That's what we've been doing and what we continue to do. Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's really important because we have a lot of significant agenda items that are occurring that will set policy for years to come, whether it's the number of personnel, the involvement around the world, whether it's missile defense, and in particular, we're beginning to have some hearings on nuclear capabilities. The public proposal of the President that he'd like to reduce by 1/3 our already substantially reduced nuclear arsenal raises serious concern to me, and we'll be asking you as time goes by your best judgment on that. Of course, it goes beyond the technical issues to role in the world and the confidence our allies have in us also. General Dempsey, one of the most amazing things to me that I believe has caused a great deal of unnecessary problems with the sequester and the reduction in spending was the fact that this was passed in August of 2011. And the President said in a national debate it wasn't going to happen, but it was the law of the United States. He signed it. And I frankly, at the time, wondered how it was going to be fixed. I had my doubts that we'd get it fixed. And the President's indicated basically he wants more taxes and more spending, and I won't find any other reductions in spending anywhere else to relieve the burdens on the military. But I'd just like to get one thing straight. With regard to the difficulties you've faced this year, my understanding is that you made no plans and made no cuts in the first 6 months of this year, even though you were aware that this was the law in 2011. And as a result, you've had to make more dramatic cuts, more unwise reductions to try to finish this year within the budget law that you've been told you have to finish under. Has that been a problem for you, and why did we not plan to reduce spending all year instead of making up all of that in the last 6 months?
It has been a problem, Senator. We found ourselves with 80% spent with half the year to go. The answer is, how did we get to that position? You know, that was the budget guidance we received.
Well, you got that from the executive branch.
I get it. I get my marching orders from the department, but I assume they got it from the Office of the Management and Budget.
And I do remain concerned about the impact on the Defense Department. It's not just that I have as a member of this committee and personal views, a strong affinity for the men and women who serve us in uniform, but because half of the reductions in spending that were included in the Budget Control Act have fallen on 1/6 of the United States government spending, the Defense Department. So this is a disproportionate reduction in spending, in my opinion, to our Defense Department. And it's at a level that's troubling to me. I'm ranking on the Budget Committee, and I've seen the numbers, and we should look for other areas within our government to find some savings too. For example, Medicaid has no cuts, Social Security has no cuts, Medicare had a little, but it didn't help the Defense Department. That was used to reduce spending reductions in other departments. Food stamps has gone up fourfold in the last 10 or 12 years, had 0 cuts. So we just at a point that we've got to work out, figure how to deal with this. And I do believe you're being asked to take a disproportionate cut, and Congress should work with the President, the Commander-in-Chief, and he needs to help us work through a way to spread out some of this belt tightening so that other departments and agencies in the government tighten their belt too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
the opportunity.
Thank you for your comments as well about me, Senator Sessions. Now, Senator, do I have a card? I don't. So is Senator King here? If not, Senator Kane, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your public service. Let's talk first about upgrading the ISR fleet. You're moving from manned platforms to a combination of unmanned and manned platforms, and the law directs the Vice Chairman and the Undersecretary to certify annually that the Navy remains in compliance in supporting the needs of the combatant commanders, and the Navy has certified compliance. And so my interest in this is that in the President's budget, the Navy plans to gradually draw down your manned platforms before going over to the P-8 platform, and then to field a fleet of MQ-4C Tritons, the UAVs. Now, it's my understanding that the Navy the Secretary of the Navy is supportive of this position. Have you all spoken to the combatant commanders to confirm if these ISR capabilities fulfill their requirements?
I haven't recently covered that particular slice of the combatant commander requirements. They're going to have their integrated priority lists due to us here over this fall, and we'll scan those. We also get constant feedback from their J8 organizations as to whether they're received. But I'd have to take it up for the record on whether specifically in that area we're answering their needs.
Okay, I would appreciate it. I think that there is some concern in the Secretary's office about this transition, and to see that those manned platforms are utilized so that there's not a gap while we're transitioning over and getting the combined fleet between unmanned and manned. Now, once we are withdrawing from Afghanistan, there's going to be a lot of ISR assets that will come back and be distributed throughout the combatant commands. I sure wish that you all would take a look at what sequestration is doing to us in the Southern Command and the huge success that they've had in the interdiction of drugs coming north. As a matter of fact, just in last year, Colombia itself interdicted 207 metric tons. As it started to come through Central America toward the U.S. border, the JIATF, which is the Joint Task Force going after these drugs, that interdicted 152 additional metric tons. And by the time it gets to the southern border of the U.S., then they were interdicting another 10 metric tons. Well, you can see that the big part has already been interdicted before it ever got there, thanks to a lot of U.S. Southern Command's efforts in the Joint Task Force. And so I would surely appreciate it as these assets, ISR assets, are going to be available, that you will consider Southern Command as a part to use those ISR assets. And I know you will, but would you, just for the record, state what are going to be the long-term effects of the sequester on the counter-narcotics mission?
Well, in general, I'll tell you that we will be able to do less in the maritime transit zones for the immediate future because of some combination of sequestration and also maintenance that's been deferred over time. And I am concerned about it. In fact, met over the past several months with both my Canadian and my Mexican counterparts to see if we can collaboratively find a way to mitigate the risk. You want to add anything to that?
We've just had to make some very difficult choices in the current environment with readiness declining and the Navy unable to support as many ship deployments as they'd like to. As you well know, we've had some considerable success, as you point out, with interdicting drugs coming from Central and South America using in the maritime environment and other environments. So we're going to have to allocate resources. As the Chairman mentioned, it's about balancing ends, ways, and means. And we'll just have to keep our eye on it, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you where you're going to be additionally stressed is if we're fortunate to get an immigration reform bill, and if it stays in the present posture that it passed the Senate, where all this additional money is being used to enhance the effectiveness of the land border, what's going to happen to all those drugs and indeed human smuggling? It's going to go right around on the maritime border. Now, I think this was an oversight. They would not accept Senator Wicker's and my amendment to enhance by just $1 billion DHS, the Coast Guard, and helping DHS with unmanned platforms. The Navy blimp is also an asset that can be used on that. I have ridden in that blimp. It can dwell for a long time. The amount of gas that it takes for a 24-hour mission is the same amount of gas that it takes for an F-16 to crank up and just run out to the runway. So it's a cost-effective platform for observation of something like a maritime border. Hopefully, if we can pass the immigration reform, we're going to be able to enhance that maritime border. But this is going to all the more bring into question the desperate need to avoid sequester in a place like Southern Command, not even to speak of all the other commands. I spent some time with Admiral McCraven, and he walked me through what's going to happen to Special Operations Command if we have this sequester continue. And it's absolutely ridiculous that we would be doing this to ourselves. Not only shooting ourselves in the foot, but starting to shoot ourselves up the torso. So I wish you would take a look at the ISR assets as they come back and allocate some of them to Southern Command. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Senator Nelson. We're going to have a very brief round, second round, about 2 minutes for those of us who are here. We've got a vote. I can't see that clock, but it's getting close, 12:15. Is it there already? Anyway, I think we have a vote at 12:15. So I'm going to have a 2-minute second round. General, I want to find a way to work through the options issue on Syria. Not in 2 minutes, but I want to work through it because I think there's a real uncertainty among some of us as to what your role is in terms of telling us your personal opinion on things, what your role is in terms of giving advice to the President, in terms of the options that you have laid out, the pluses, minuses, strengths, weaknesses of each of those options, whether they can be effective, what are the costs, what are the opportunity costs, and so forth. And what I'm going to ask you to do, for the record, is to give us a unclassified list of options and your personal assessment of the pros and cons of those options. Now, some of those pros and cons in your personal assessment, it'll be pretty obvious that you're not going to recommend something. I mean, but I'm not going to ask you point blank which of these options you recommend. You've said you're not going to tell us. You can't tell us. Or you haven't decided what, for whatever reason, you're not going to tell us what your preferred option is, but what you are willing to do is go through with us the pluses and minuses of each of the various options, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do in a fairly thorough way for the record. If you need to give us a classified annex, that's fine, but I want to work very hard to try to work through this issue of the options in Syria. Now, I think you're aware of the fact that I personally have favored arming, training the opposition. I personally indeed want to consider, and have even gone beyond that, talking about standoff airstrikes against certain facilities. That's just my own personal opinion, so you know where I'm coming from. You and I have talked about it. I'm not trying to persuade you that that's the right position or should be your position, but that is my public position. So my question to you is whether or not you are willing to give to us an unclassified list of options and the strengths and weaknesses, the costs and effectiveness and so forth of each of those options.
Absolutely, Senator, and as well as the framework of a strategy in which they might make sense, which I'm happy to do.
Anything else you want to add to it? Don't want to limit you in any way.
Yeah.
But as long as it includes that, it may help us work through this issue.
Yes, but I would ask you to take my point even now that the decision whether to use force is one that I must communicate personally to the President. And as you've seen me do in the past, if the President takes my advice and you ask me, I'll tell you that he took my advice. If he doesn't, I'm more than willing to tell you, no, my recommendation was something else. And he's certainly under no obligation to take my advice.
Well, you've indicated that you're not going to share with us your opinion, if you have one, on whether or not to use force.
While it's being deliberated.
While it's being deliberated. Right. And I'm not asking you to do that.
Right.
I think if you just are able to do what I've asked you to do, that it may be clear that at least some of those options you think are not wise options just from the list of your pros and cons assessment.
Right.
If you'll
Okay. And I thought we got it at some level in the classified briefing, but
we need an unclassified here.
Okay.
Because you said you're willing to lay out options and to show pros and cons of options and whether they can be effective, what are the costs, various costs, and so forth. So if you'll do that, it may be a step that would be a constructive, positive step. And if you can do that, within the next 4 or 5 days, we appreciate it. Senator Ayotte, I believe, no, but I may be wrong. Let me see.
I am next, but I'm going to defer first to Senator Graham and then go.
Okay, Senator Graham.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Chairman Dempsey, back to Afghanistan. If no troops were left behind for whatever reason in 2015, we just pulled out and there were no American forces left behind, the zero option, very quickly, what's the likely outcome in Afghanistan?
Although I've told you that the progress of the security forces has been significant, they would not have the level of confidence to sustain themselves over time if it happens that precipitously.
And it would lead to what I believe would be a fractured state, a larger safe haven for al-Qaeda types, and over time would be a disaster. Do you agree with that?
Those are all high risks.
Okay, thank you. Admiral Winnefeld, sequestration. You, in terms of the Air Force, if sequestration, let's start with the Navy, over a 10-year period, how many ships will we have in the Navy after 10 years of sequestration?
I don't have the exact number for you.
Somebody says 232 ships.
It could be that low.
Okay. Would that be just like crazy?
It would certainly impact our ability to respond to contingencies.
Okay, well, I think it's crazy.
And to have forward presence to deter.
1/3 of the fighter force is grounded today. They're beginning to fly again because you've robbed Peter to pay Paul. But is the effect of sequestration grounded 1/3 of our fighter force?
It's grounded 9 fighter squadrons, which is not 1/3 of the fighter force, but there are other squadrons that are flying at a lower rate, lower.
Okay, what would it take for the enemy to knock out 9 Air Force squadrons?
I know where you're coming from, and it would be a heck of
Well, if I were the
effort.
Iranians, I would send a thank you note to the Congress for grounding more Air Force planes than they could on their own. So to say I'm upset about this is an understatement. Finally, what if, General Dempsey, the Congress could not find a way to reach a deal on funding the government? Come October the 1st, we just can't fund the government, and the politicians in Washington can't come up with a budget, and the military, we had no money for our military. What signal would that be sending to our troops and to our enemies? What kind of national security impact would it be in the times in which we live if there was no agreement to fund the government? What would it mean to our national security?
You remember, Senator, I held up this slide showing that these kids that we sent into harm's way trust us. I'd have to assess that bond of trust would be broken. Well, I think they would be certainly happy at our demise.
Okay, thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Winnefeld, how would you, when you look at the security of this country, what would you prioritize first?
I'd prioritize first the survival of the nation.
And would that mean protecting the homeland?
It would definitely.
Okay. So I know that earlier you were asked about our missile defense system, and you said that the first dollar we should spend is on the sensor to add discrimination power, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess I'm kind of dumbfounded by it because, as I understand it, that was not in the budget proposal put forth by the department. Why was that if it was the number one?
I'd have to review the budget documents to validate that. But one thing to remember is we have a new commander of the Missile Defense Agency, new director there. He's doing an exceptionally good job, Vice Admiral Searing. And he, along with his technical experts, have studied this, and they have come to the conclusion that you can get better shot doctrine if you get better discrimination. And he would hasten to add that if the threat gets worse, we're going to need more missiles as well, which is one of the reasons
and
why.
so let me follow that. You had said in your testimony that you have to watch the threat develop from Iran. In fact, in the recent interview that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave, he said that Iran is building ICBMs to reach America, the American mainland, within a few years. Of course, that's consistent with what we've heard if 2015 is a potential date when Iran will have ICBM capability or could have to reach the mainland of the United States. Is that right?
That date, it's an intelligence assessment. It shifts all the time, but 2015 is the current number when they could
So
potentially have a
2015 is the
capability.
number, and with respect, I guess I'm a little dumbfounded why we keep saying that there's no current military requirement for an East Coast missile defense site when the priority of our nation is to protect the homeland. And as I understand it, if we went in terms of an EIS to production of an East Coast missile defense site, it would take about 6 years, wouldn't it?
I don't know that it would take that long. I'd have to get the exact numbers for you, but I think that when the EISs are done, closely on the heels of that, we would have another threat assessment that's continually going on. And we would have to come to a decision fairly soon, I think, after that, as to whether we would do another East Coast or an East Coast missile field to start with.
When I look at the possibility of 2015 ICBM capability, I think the tail's wagging the dog in terms of how long it would take to put that up. And I know you said first dollar. What if you had the second dollar of missile defense? What would you do with it?
Well, the first thing we want to do is get the CE-2 missiles working and get them into the silos in Alaska to get the additional missiles we've talked about. That's going to take some time in and of itself to get that done. The first dollar, as I mentioned, is the sensors. So we have this sort of quality has a quantity all its own phenomenon where we have to shoot fewer missiles at the inbound threats. And if we can accomplish that, that will really help us. And then, assuming if the threat continues on a trajectory where Iran develops an ICBM, we may well need an East Coast missile field in order to defend this country.
Well, when we met, you said, I think what you're saying today is the second dollar. And by the way, we could do both at once if we wanted to in terms of protecting the homeland, could we not?
Physically, we could, but in terms
If
of...
we allocated the resources for you to do it.
Right. And the question is that the wisest use of the resources? And it competes with everything else, but as you pointed out at the very beginning of this discussion, the highest priority is defense of the nation.
Thank you both for being here. Appreciate your service to the country.
Thank you, Senator Ayotte. Thank you both. We are hopeful that we will have a speedy markup and confirmation, but that'll be up to the whole committee, but that would be my hope. Thank you. We thank your spouses, your wives who are here, your families, again, for their great support over the years, and we will stand adjourned.